Okay, so again, today is the last day of the three-part series of leveraging LinkedIn to advance your career. Um, and um, so last Friday, we spoke about, or I shared about the LinkedIn profile strategy related to principles and formatting. This past Monday, I talked about the LinkedIn algorithm and steps 2 through 4, and explaining, giving you some strong practicals with what to do with your time and how to invest your time on LinkedIn for your career. And again, just to reiterate, LinkedIn is not a one and done. LinkedIn is an investment of your time. I advocate for 60 minutes a week, really just 10 minutes a day, or you can kind of block it out. But it will pay dividends over your career. And it could be very quickly, or it could be just one of those things that trickles in more opportunities for you. So today in session 3, we're going to apply session 1. And I had 4 individuals give me their LinkedIn profiles and said, Chris, would you allow me to work with you on Wednesday today? So what you're going to do is you're going to hear me talking with someone live and kind of walking them through my principles in formatting, as I mentioned on last Friday in session 1. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'm going to share another screen. And let's see here. Okay. And then here we go. So do you, Karen, do you see your screen or your LinkedIn profile?
I do.
Okay, excellent. Very good. So I am going to have, so thank you for being courageous to do this with me today.
And thank you for doing it. I think I sent you an email. I had a bad flashback to my 1L year where I said, yeah, sure, look at
I,
my first draft of a memo. I didn't know there was that much red ink in the world.
yeah, well, yeah, I promise I'll be kind and gentle with you
Thank
today.
you.
Uh, so I want to, okay, so we have an about section. So in general, we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about just some observations I have and um, and some things I can share. And I will also answer questions. So for you, Karen, because you were um, willing to kind of do this with me, you're welcome to ask me questions as we do this. So
Thank you.
absolutely. So, and for everybody who is listening and who stays on, when I go through or when I get done with each profile, which I have 4 if everyone shows up today, I will definitely take additional questions at the end of today. So, um, so Karen, what I first see is I'm glad I see you using your professional headline. Um, I could give you some additional advice here on some thoughts. So one thing you could consider is putting in some qualitative or um, some ways that describe who you are as an attorney. So you have titles here: Assistant Corporate Counsel, Human Resources Director, which is great, and Corporate Secretary. Um, that's actually completely fine, and um, I wouldn't I wouldn't necessarily remove any of those if you don't want to. You could also put in there, and I sometimes like using the straight line as a formatting thing. So that's next to the kind of on your keyboard all the way to the right above the enter button. There's a little line that I sometimes put in there instead of a comma. Um,
Gotcha.
but you could put in there a descriptive word of what kind of individual you are when you show up every day. Some people put in hungry. Some people put in, like they could put themselves as a business leader, or another way to describe them versus just simply work titles. Um, and we could probably suss that out a little bit as we talk about your about section. Um, so in the about section, well, you attended my Friday, right? My first
I
session?
did.
Okay. Were you able to start kind of thinking about when I mentioned the formatting for your about section?
I did. And in fact, after you said that, I realized how little attention I've paid to this. And
That's okay.
A, I think I need to do that. B, I did come up with some ideas of things that I do, but I asked you the question about corporate generalist because my concern is always that people see that term and think that I know a lot about very little. And actually, what I really mean to say by that is how many things
You do know.
I touch every day, how many
Yeah.
different issues I touch every day. And I'm not sure how to put that in there.
What's going on?
Yeah. Um, hold on a sec. Make sure everybody mutes. There we go. And so, are you saying corporate generalist would be one of your strengths?
Yes, I think that it is. I mean,
Okay.
I have HR experience, labor and employment experience, real estate experience, corporate governance, compliance, but I'm not sure how to put that all in there. And sometimes my concern is that people may look at that and think that I'm just rattling off a bunch of things instead of the fact that I do actually handle those types of duties every day. And as I think most in-house do.
Sure. So those you could actually list out. So you could consider yourself, I mean, so again, formatting. So in the about section, your first sentence, um, uh, kind of describing yourself, and you can use the word corporate generalist in your first sentence. 15-year, 20-year corporate generalist, working with public and private companies in legal executive roles. But you want to keep it as a short sentence and nothing that's too run-on, multiple lines. When you put in the header core strengths, and then you start listing out in bullet point form your core strengths, you could break down your corporate generalist idea. So your role or your experience, Karen, if I look here, so so out of law school, you've been at Lord Baltimore Capital Corporation your entire career, correct?
Yeah.
Okay,
Since I was 2. Yeah.
that's awesome. So I guess what I would challenge you with is don't be afraid in your 4 to 6 core strengths is to break that out. You mentioned real estate, you mentioned labor and employment, you mentioned a couple different things. Are you supervising anybody right now?
I do.
Okay, how many people?
I supervise 2 people. We're a small company. We're 17. And can I ask a question? I don't want to take up everyone's time. Just
No, you're good.
all about me. But here's something. I also run the audits for our company, you know,
Okay.
when the auditors come in, but I'm never sure how to put that in there, or if people may look at that and wonder, what's an attorney doing that for? But because we are a small company, all of us touch a lot of things. Is that something that you should add, or does that make you seem like I don't know, like a not real lawyer because you're also doing this business stuff, I guess?
So that's a great question. And I just want to speak to your situation, but to everybody's situation. I think there is no one perfect job for in-house attorneys. I think every job is different. I think there's some qualifications, but in the really biggest companies, people specialize. But the smaller the companies they get, the more hats you wear. So you've already explained that you're an HR director. And so I would definitely, are you on the audit committee?
We don't have an audit committee. Well, actually, I
Okay.
strike that. We have an audit committee, but it's our board members, but the work is
Okay.
done by management, by
Okay.
staff.
So I would definitely explain that. But Karen, the kind of the key word I would kind of bring to attention is context. So on here, people local in Baltimore may know who is Lord Baltimore Capital Group, but you have to explain to the reader who the company is. So again, that formatting for your experience here, first sentence for your current role as assistant corporate counsel, HR director, corporate secretary, first sentence they should see in that experience section is, what is your role? Space, who is the company? And that's where you say, you know, we're only 17 people, but you can say it in a way that it in one sentence that gives context to where you're at.
Okay.
And then space, and then you can put highlights if you want. And but the fact that you're overseeing audit is a pretty significant thing. And so you could put that under a core strength, or you can put it under, you know, when I sit in the about section after your core strengths, you would put career highlights, which is a way to kind of explain the one-off situations or the ongoing stuff that isn't, because you may not be like become over if you go to a bigger company, you're not going to be over audit normally. That would be a CFO or somebody within the accounting department. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, but so what I would do is career highlights as another header in your about section space, and I put a bullet point, and I'd say, I would put like either audit or oversee audit hyphen I oversee the annual audit or the quarterly audit of our company. Because of the dynamic of the team, we wear multiple hats at our company, and but give context to it. Does that make sense?
It does. So
Okay.
I work for a privately held investment company. It's a
Okay.
family office. Should I put that
Oh,
somewhere then in the about?
absolutely. If you're a family office, that's a great buzzword. Privately held, absolutely.
Okay.
So, and because that's the only place you've been at since you graduated law school, I would put that directly in your first sentence. So you've been um, you know, as many years as it been, was it 14, 13 years experience, I think since 2006.
Mm-hmm.
13 years serving in uh, legal counsel roles for a family office, for a privately held family office, um, uh, overseeing bum, 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 bum. But don't make that a big phrase. You just want to concisely state what your role is. Now, when I mentioned at Lower Baltimore, when you go down to your experience section, the second sentence you should write after your role is you need to tell what Lower Baltimore is. So it's a seven person family office. Is it a multifamily or is it a single family office?
It's multifamily.
Okay, so that's even more important. So it's not just one wealthy family, but it's more than one. So we're a multifamily family office uh, with a team of 17. I don't know if you are allowed to talk about your AUM or what you're overseeing and what you function.
I think that's definitely a possibility because it was previously on the real estate arm of our website. So
Okay.
it's out there in the public domain. Yes,
Okay.
I
Good.
think it can. Thank you. It's a good question.
Yeah, it's important. So again, that's context. So if you're like, the day comes where somebody wants to talk to Karen, and they realize you've had 15 years in the financial services industry, specifically family office, they may want to say, hey, we've got this great opportunity. Would you be interested? Because we're a larger financial service organization where we have our own division of family offices. Would you want to come join? No one would ever know unless you had the context explained about your experience in here. Um, so um, does that help?
That helps me a lot. And I
Okay.
almost feel embarrassed to admit that I never thought about writing that myself, especially
Oh,
since
it's
I've been
okay.
asked if I work for Lord Baltimore Dry Cleaners or Lord Baltimore Hotel. No, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, you bet. I am going to jump to the next person, but I encourage you to check out the slides or go back to what I was sharing about the formatting, because I think you've got a lot to say in saying you got good content. Um, I would only use like general corporate or corporate generalist in a brief way, but I would break that down because you've only been at one company and you've done lots of things. Those should be your core strengths, and you should give context to each one of those with what you've been doing there.
Thank you very much.
Okay, you bet, absolutely.
I'm going to mute myself so I don't annoy anyone.
No, you're good. Hey, one final thought I'll just say, Karen, is I would put family office in your job description, or not your job description, but your professional headline.
Okay.
Um, you know, uh, Corporate secretary isn't as, I would just say, as sexy as it could be because it's not a publicly traded company.
Okay.
But the fact that you are an HR director and you are a legal executive there, family office is a great thing, financial services, private investment management. Maybe there's some other components that are really critical to your skill that you could put in there. But family office is uh, it's more descriptive, and that kind of changes my entire paradigm of who you are.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, you bet. Okay, so I'm gonna mute you, and then
Chris,
uh,
Sean Magruder is on the line, and she has a
oh,
1 o'clock meeting. So if you can move to her next, that would be great.
awesome. So I just did that. Um, Good morning or good afternoon, Sean. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you? I'm Zoom to Zoom, so I was doing a training and the training didn't end. My noon training didn't end right at 1.
You're completely
Sorry.
fine. No worries. So do you see your profile on Zoom now?
I do.
Okay, great. All right. So let's see here. So you're at Johns Hopkins University of Applied Physics. Okay, in the EEO office. Um, okay, great. So just some things kind of out of the gate as I'm looking here. Um, um, I am going to just go straight to, so you do have your about section, which is great. At least it's there. Many people don't have it. Did you attend my Friday session, the first session?
I did. I heard part of it in the car, and then I heard the end of it on the way. I had another
Okay,
appointment away from home, so I didn't get everything, but
that's okay. Yeah, that's okay. So I'm going to just take you through again some thoughts just for you to consider, and um, I encourage you to get the slides and see the video again, just as review for yourself. But so first thing I see in the about section, you've got 3 lines here being used, and it's very generalized. And what I want to encourage you to do is, I believe you bring a lot of value to an organization even before I've met you, or at least as I'm starting to look at your LinkedIn profile. And what I want to encourage you to do, and it's a challenge, is in one sentence, um, describe what you bring to the table, and that it should include how many years of experience you have as an attorney. It should include some of your kind of a way to summarize what you bring. So I'm going to give you an example. As I'm looking here, okay, so you're a 93 law grad at Howard. That's great. So, so you bring some tremendous experience, and it looks like a lot of public service, USDA. My goodness. So you've got a lot to the table you can bring. So I would be unapologetic about the years of experience you have, and describing both, I mean, public service experience, both with the USDA, the Social Security Administration, and now Johns Hopkins. Um, and where uh, where we would go from this point is, again, one sentence: what do you bring to the table, or who you are as a legal executive. Space, because you got to use spacing for it to be readable in your about section, and then you want to put a header in called core strengths. And generally, when people are asking me for help on this, it's for their next opportunity, for when someone wants to hire you. And so, because of your experience, I want to see 4 to 6 core strengths about who you are as a legal executive. And that could be, you can end up at another agency, you can end up another higher education organization, or research organization. But have you thought of what 4 to 6 core strengths would be for you?
I have. They were on my current resume.
Okay,
And so I think written communication is a strength.
okay, hmm,
I have a strong litigation
good,
background.
okay,
I think I am a compassionate servant leader,
okay, good.
and I have a great organizational skills and creativity.
Is it your desire to continue doing administrative law? Because that's what I see here is a big part of your experience.
I'm not wedded to it. I'm kind of open to anything. I didn't
Okay,
necessarily plan to leave government when I did, but it was just a good opportunity,
okay,
a good time.
okay. So here's a challenge, and I'm going to use you as my guinea pig for this, but sometimes folks have experience in something that they're done with. I use the example like from Chicago, people don't want to be in retail anymore because it's getting crushed by competition. And so if there's experience that you don't want to emphasize, definitely pivot and find other strengths that are worth speaking to. Unless you're like, gosh, I've been a rock star in public service and administrative law, and I could see myself easily going to the DOJ or the SEC or some other area where some doors could be opened, then obviously you want to emphasize that. So I think the question I would pose to you is, because of your evident long tenure in government agencies, would you be opposed to that, or are you more interested in kind of distancing yourself from it?
I think I would want to probably distance myself from maybe
Okay.
the administrative law piece and
Okay.
perhaps the disclosure piece. I think the ethics and compliance, piece is something that's an area that, would be consistent with what I'm doing now
Okay.
in the private sector. So I
Okay.
think I'd like to keep that because I think it would make me marketable, as would, sort of the general legal experience, but I don't necessarily think I have to highlight torts or disclosure, which is what I did a lot of as assistant general counsel at USDA.
Got it. So some things I'll just speak to. So for you, you mentioned leadership. You should start with that. And if you put in leadership or like executive leadership as a core strength, that should be the first thing people see. And then put like a hyphen. And then what I encourage you to do is you can do two things. You could talk about the size of your teams because you want to give scope and context to what leadership has been. So like and you could do executive leadership, you could do management as a second one, but um, help people understand what was under your responsibility as far as numbers are concerned. Because again, leaders hire leaders, and leaders um, look for results, and the language of leadership is numbers. And so find ways to communicate in numbers your experience and the things you've done. So if it's multiple departments, size of teams, direct, indirect reports. So that's one point. And then another point is when you describe leadership, you mentioned more of your style. Definitely elaborate, or just mention, my leadership style is da 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 da, and include that when you are using that as a core strength. Is that helpful?
It is.
Okay.
It is. I think, and also for that with the numbers. So I had a large staff when I was over the civil rights
Mhm.
organization at USDA. Like 75 contract and staff and a huge workload there
That's awesome.
and a lot of programs. But I also managed a complex reimbursable budget. And so that also could, you could get numbers there in terms of, the millions of dollars,
Yeah, and
contract awards.
okay. Yeah, I mean, you could talk about a couple different ways. I mean, in your role, were you more tactician or were you more like management leadership driven in most of your roles?
For the past, I would say since 2005, I've been uh, a leader. So I started as a sort of a first level supervisor in maybe 2006, and
Okay,
then went into being like I went to an executive development program and then became a SES official at USDA. So I have like 7 years of executive leadership experience.
that's great. So when it comes to core strengths, I mean, I would emphasize more of the direction of where you're headed. So, you know, leadership management programs, and um, and then some of those things under that could be litigation for you, and it could be like a couple other points that are relevant. You mentioned privacy, um, and um, anything else that could speak to the strengths of where you want to go as well. Because when you have as much experience as you have, it can be kind of a wrestle. It's like you can do a lot of things, but the question is, what do you really want to do? And and what have you done to kind of communicate to the readers um, the roll-up of your experience? Does that make sense?
It does. Do you
Okay.
think with the experiences that I've had that I could be competitive for like general counsel positions?
That's a great question. For public companies, I think that'd be a challenge. Private companies, probably. It just depends. I mean, so as a recruiter, I'm an optimist for all candidates. And I would say it just really depends on um, who the employer is. So realistically, I mean, with what you have, I'm thinking of higher education. Um, unless, so for you, Sean, um, it's a highly relational dynamic when people get considered for GCs, whether it's relational through a recruiter or relational with the hiring manager or the board members of a company looking for somebody, or just a circle of friends of you who can speak to your skills. And so would I say that you would not be a good candidate for GC of a big company? I mean, how do you define big, and where would it be, and what would be its focus? So, I mean, I think that depends, and I think it's how you communicate it, but um, it kind of just depends. And so but I've seen people,
Or a nonprofit, or like another like a nonprofit.
Sure. I mean, it really speaks to who you are and how you communicate yourself and how people have seen and attest to your skills, the higher you get up. So if people can easily speak to, and with the circles you've been a part of, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some influential people that say, you know what, we should really consider Sean for this. So I would not rule it out, but the dynamic is full of serendipity and luck and relationship, and it's learning how to communicate what you've been able to do and have people also support you in that process.
Thank you so very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Just a couple things before I jump to the next one. So the places you've worked at speak for themselves, but it's still so important to give context. So I do see some numbers in here, which is super helpful. Try to find ways. So like when I'm looking at John Hopkins, it's definitely a large organization. First sentence, what was your role? Space. Second sentence, who is the organization? So applied, excuse me, applied physics laboratory. You're not GC or associate general counsel over the entire organization. It's just a specific part, but help people understand that with a short description of who the employer is, and then give highlights to things you've done, projects solved, problems, projects completed, problems solved, wins, and examples of stuff that you're doing for them. And then I would do the same within all of these. Give context, it's gonna serve you. Even your, in essence, a short stint at the CFTC, find ways to give context to what you've been up to, all right?
And that was like an internship. I mean, that was in, I think after my first year in law school.
Sure. It doesn't diminish the value that you could have got, though.
Okay.
So, all right, very good. Thank you, Sean. Appreciate it, and I hope this is helpful.
Thank you. I'm sorry I got to run in my next meeting, but I really
Okay,
appreciate the
right.
feedback, and hopefully we'll connect later.
Okay, sounds good. Take
All
care.
right, have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thanks, you too. Bye-bye. All right, and then Pillar, let me see if I can find you. Aha, are you unmuted? Looks like that. Let's see, maybe not. Are you there, Pillar?
I'm here now. Can you hear me?
I can. Okay, great. Excellent.
It's Pilar.
Pilar, sorry. Okay, very good. And do you see your profile on Zoom? Okay, great. So kind of out of the gate, I want to just mention something. So you don't necessarily have to list your employer. It's not that you don't, you could, you don't have to in your professional headline here, because it's kind of understood off to the right that that's where your role is. This is a chance, Pilar, for you to not just list your title, but maybe a responsibility or two, or more of who you are when you show up. So I've got people who talk about themselves as, I've seen people say business savvy. I've seen people talk about other areas of core strengths. I've seen people mention hungry or fun or different areas that kind of brand you. It's really an opportunity in the headline space to kind of speak to who you are as an individual. But it's obviously very subjective, so I'll leave that to you. So going to the About section, I love that you have this here. I already see your first sentence, experience in-house counsel with more than 20 years legal experience. What I encourage you to do is not have the giant paragraph, but maybe expound on that just slightly, that first sentence. And then, as I mentioned to each person, the next thing they should see is a header that I recommend as core strengths, and then having listed out 4 to 6 core strengths. Did you attend my first session?
I did.
Okay, great. Do you have core strengths already in mind?
I, I think I have some, but I have some of the same challenges as Sean does. And even Karen, I'm kind of a corporate generalist. And after we had some restructuring in the company, I ended up with the title I have, but the roles are the same. So it's so many things, which I guess I have to whittle down to, what I want people to see and what I want to highlight.
It is that, and so it has to do with self-awareness. It has to do with um, you say whittle, distill down, kind of boil down. What are those 4 to 6 things that are skills and are some personality traits or kind of soft skills and what you bring to the table that you want an employer to know you for? And what people are tempted to do is say everything. I can do all of this, and it doesn't serve an employer. It's more important for them to know your core strengths. And so I'm not saying it's an easy thing to do. Now, you can still put the whole list of all the what I call boilerplate content at the bottom of the about section. But because of your years of experience, I think there's probably quite a bit of things you could say. So so I'm noticing a number of different things on here. So you graduated law school in 2009?
Yeah, so I
Okay.
graduated in 2009, and I've
Okay.
worked in the legal field. Even when I was in high school, I was a legal secretary at a law firm down the street from the school. So, I worked as a paralegal once I got a paralegal degree. I worked as a law clerk when I was in grad school and law school. So that first 10 years is not as an attorney.
Okay.
Well, I guess for the first 9 years, and then that second 11 are as an attorney.
Okay. And that second 11 is when you're at Chesapeake, correct?
Correct. And they've changed names. Injured Workers Insurance Fund is now Chesapeake.
I see. Okay. So that actually might be slightly confusing with the two here have the same years. And so some counsel I can give you around that is just simply giving context to Chesapeake. So the first sentence they'll see, and you may actually want to separate this out. So because your experience as a lawyer after law school has been with one company, you have flexibility to do this. So you could set up Chesapeake as Counsel Director of Government Relations as one role and one company listed. And then before that, you could create, instead of the two stacking on top of each other, you could just create another one of these and show the duties of Government Relations Senior Counsel from August 2009 to April 2020. And that'll allow you to have more real estate to explain all that you've done. And in that, let me just share. So it's not easy to do, but the first sentence they see for the role that you have, just if you can in one sentence, explain it briefly, and then space, and then give context to the employer. And you could say Chesapeake's employer insurance company is, and you could say it's formerly Senior, Injured Workers Insurance Fund. But you can mention it in part of the description of who the company is.
Okay.
So let's just jump up here for a second. Okay, so demonstrate a history of working in a corporate setting and in the insurance industry. So a core strength for you is the insurance industry. It's a strength. You've done it for since you've been an attorney, and I would list that as one of your strengths. And some of the things you've dealt in it. Let me see here if I can understand what you've done. So contracts, legal writing, compliance, insurance, regulatory, workman's comp, litigation, government affairs. I mean, that's like your core strengths. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but you could have. Are you overseeing anybody? Do you have any direct reports at all? Do you have any management experience?
I don't know. There's
Okay.
never, you know.
Okay. And so that gives you the chance to make your core strengths insurance industry, as an example. Another one could be workman's comp litigation. Are you you're seeing outside counsel, or are you stepping in the court yourself?
In my, before I got promoted to director, I was going to court on workers' comp cases. We're a workers' comp insurance company. So
Okay.
I was handling claims just to get a sense and a feel for what was happening with our claims exposure about once, twice a month. In my new
Yeah.
role, I'm not doing that, but I continue to litigate all the regulatory issues in court.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, so you have active litigation experience. And so I would definitely list that. I would list regulatory. I would list, you could put contracts. You have compliance, government. I know that sounds like that continues to be a theme for you. I mean, I would list those as your core strengths, and then I would find ways to roll up your 11 years. And if there's examples of pre-law school that's relevant to those core strengths, um, of measurable examples of things you've done. Or so if it's, for example, for workman's comp, I know that it's a volume issue. So how many cases were you overseeing at once? How many cases were you managing at once? Tends to be a reportable number for workman's comp. If it's insurance regulatory, what are all the matters and agencies and things that you're dealing with on a regulatory basis on a federal or on a local level? If it's government affairs, what was your involvement on the lobbying side? And how were you relating to government in that regard? But finding ways, even with contracts, did you create the MSA? You know, how regularly were you updating contracts, both direct and indirect, or internal? Finding ways to communicate it with numbers and measuring your experience is super helpful for employers.
Okay.
Do you think you can do that? Is that something that, looking back and pulling experience out and communicating that?
Yeah, I mean, it's, the job is so cyclical. I mean, at one point in the year, I'm only lobbying. I'm down in the Capitol all the time. That's all I'm doing, handling bills. And, there's a numeric value I could plug in there. I don't know how meaningful it would be to somebody, but it is an attention grabber. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Contracts are thing. I could probably come up with a number of contracts that I reviewed, or maybe, a value, millions of dollars worth of contract negotiations and approval.
So again, we're summarizing, even though that you have cyclical roles, and government affairs, as far as I understand, is extremely cyclical. So you could explain that if you broke out the two roles and had more space to type in content, you can break out the different responsibilities after describing who the employer is, and just describing, 3 months out of the year I was handling, state of Maryland matters from a regulatory standpoint, and I'd handle a docket of, 20 or 30 cases at once for workman's comp. Just kind of giving examples, but bringing out more of that detail for people to see. So again, this is meant to be a summary of your 11 years or more experience. And then down here, you're breaking it down for the role that you had and highlighting things. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have any questions? Was there other expectations you had and wanted for me to help you with this?
I mean, as Sean had asked, big picture, I'm in school now. I'm almost finished a dual LLM, which I write in that about section. I don't know that it's really highlighted as much as I feel like the effort and the aggravation I'm putting into it is. And, the purpose and all that is to, help round out some of these new and up and coming areas, as well as bolster the compliance experience, with an eye towards a general counsel type position. So, I see what you're saying, where we can kind of break out the different roles I've had at the same company to expand on the different things there. But, you know, somebody has 10 to 20 years legal experience, nobody's really looking at your education because it's not really that relevant anymore, except for in my case, I feel like it is.
Um, so I think you're right. I mean, education is valuable, but what I have found, and I don't want to minimize the dual degree you're getting right now at Albany, but the value from the education a lot of times comes from the networks and the people you know. And they're the ones that tend to open the doors. The degree is helpful, and obviously certain institutions can open up more doors than others and give more credibility. But I know the employers appreciate the degrees, but I think it's the experience that they appreciate more in what you've done. You could, and what I also mentioned from my session 1 is in the About section, after you have your core strengths, you put another header there which says career highlights, and you could say and emphasize the degree that you're completing in cybersecurity and what was it? There's a number of things, data privacy. And that could be a way to drive that to their attention initially, unless you want to put that as one of your core strengths now. But I think the hands-on experience with an employer, the employers value more. So, but if you want to get that more attention, I put that in that career highlights as this is what I've done. You could even maybe give examples of what you might have been doing with coursework and things like that. So.
What about something in that headline? Would you highlight, you know, candidate for XYZ, or that's going to be too jumbled in that headline?
When you say candidate for, what are you thinking?
Well, the way they have it listed is a postdoctorate, dual LLM in cybersecurity, data privacy, financial compliance, and risk management. But I mean, that's too much to write, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, what I find is you want to get to the point and you want it readable and understood. I guess my advice for you, Pilar, is test and see. Test and see how people respond. Test and see how people react. I mean, I generally don't have candidates emphasize degrees so much. And I don't have employers asking me for them per se. And so in your story, I mean, I would test and see. And but your 11 years experience will be the thing that will stand out more.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Chris.
My pleasure. I appreciate you allowing me to help.
Yeah.
All right. So, and in regards to Larice Royal.
Hello.
Hey, Larice. All right. Okay. So, Larice, you had mentioned to me a desire for more involvement with boards. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I had a lovely conversation with Lynn before everyone got started this morning, and I appreciate what she had to share. Some thoughts I'll have just initially that I've seen people do who have board experience. So when I look on your LinkedIn profile, do you already have board experience?
I do.
Okay. So
but I'm only active on one board right now.
okay.
I've been on other boards in the past, but I didn't list them.
You didn't list them. Okay.
No.
Right. And it would be interesting to see, and I mean, I could have Lynn live talking with us as well. But in essence, LinkedIn has an interesting way. So if you go up to like your me section up here, or your edit section, if you're in your profile editing, sometimes there's places where you can add additional sections. What I've seen people do as board experienced people is actually setting up almost like a job in here as experience for each one of your roles. If you're actively looking for your next legal career, it could get a little muddled. But if you're not, and you're specifically wanting to emphasize your board experience, I've seen people put their board roles in here as if jobs. And what that does for you is it gives you more real estate to talk about what you've done. and it gives you an opportunity to emphasize the folks you were, the company you were on a board for, the nonprofit, the organization. And again, I do follow the same format I mentioned before to everybody. One sentence, what was your role on the board? Space, who is the employer or the organization, give context, space, and then have highlights or some kind of header that emphasizes for you, were you on committees? What were the things you accomplished on the board? What was your role? And talk about like problem solving, projects completed, wins for you while you're on that board. Demonstrating results is could help you in essence what you're looking for, which is getting more board opportunities. Is that correct?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay. Something else you may want to consider is having other board members endorse you for those experience areas here. And they can endorse you, not here in skills and endorsements, but they can write a recommendation for you. And so you can ask for recommendations. So you got this here, ask for a recommendation or recommend Lori's. So what you could do, Lori's, is you could list those roles as if they're jobs for you. And then, and this is your previous board roles. And then you can go to maybe some colleagues of yours who are board members, or say the chairman of the board or something, and say, could you recommend me for when I was on a board? And they could share a statement that would list out all these different recommendations, and people will notice, oh, this was this was resulting because of her being on that board.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And then also up here, you have your about section. Now, if your goal, because again, when we talk about LinkedIn, there has to be focus, there has to be goals. So for everyone that I'm talking to today and that's listening to me, my assumption is your goal is the next opportunity for you to be promoted into another legal department or the one that you have. And so for you, Larice, it might be, hey, my goal is to get on more boards. So I would follow the same format in the sense of first sentence, give context and explain who you are as a legal executive and active board member. So you could say, you know, you may have 15, 20, 30 years experience as a legal executive in these types of organizations and have served on 10 boards with a total serving history of 20 years or something. I'm just throwing out numbers. Space, and then you can have core strengths as an example. And you could put, you know, maybe the first one is leadership for you, and you've been in leadership roles. And then second one could be corporate governance and board management or board participation. And each one of those core strengths need to have what I would call a hyphen and some kind of descriptive fact that rolls up on your experience. So for you, under there, if it's a board member contribution, board contribution, you should list out how many boards, you should list out the types of boards, you should list out, you know, how long have you served, and maybe even maybe a win or two or something that's worth noting while you're there. And then other core strengths that you think boards are looking for. So whether it's risk management and litigation, whether it's, so I noticed that you were, practice group leader, chief legal counsel, employment and labor, John Hopkins. That's some amazing experience. And so I'm sure boards could or would have some interest in those skill sets. You've got some, city solicitor, so you've got some public service experience as well. You certainly understand the city of Baltimore. So listing some of those things that the boards are looking for, especially the ones that you're trying to get on, is going to serve you, and also providing some kind of short description, helping give context and quantify why that's a core strength for you. Does that make sense?
Yep. Thanks a lot.
Okay, good. Do you have any questions?
Did you think I was too verbose in the about section?
Right. So what I encourage is the first sentence people should see should be no more than 2 lines and just one sentence. So yeah, I mean, so some thoughts for you. Skilled negotiator, trusted advisor, public speaker. I mean, to be honest, you could put those up here. You could put those in your professional headline.
Oh, okay.
I,
Oh.
Yeah, and I don't know if you put all of those. I mean, trusted advisor and public speaker is probably more valuable than skilled negotiator. I think it's default that most attorneys should be skilled negotiators, but to be a trusted advisor and public speaker, I think that's valuable. If you are a chief legal officer, I don't know if you need to mention employment law or practice group leader, but the valuable headline here that I see personally is chief legal counsel. And then I would put chief legal counsel and active board member or something to that effect. Because
Okay.
if that's where you're going and that's who you've been and you've got a history of being a board member, you should put that in there.
Okay.
And then also trusted advisor, that's what a board member is meant to be. Public speaker, if that's something that's very much a part of your public persona as a professional, I'd put that into there if you want to. But the proven track record to obtaining early resolution disputes, I wouldn't just put that here. I'd put that under with more context for litigation for you as a core strength.
Okay.
Is that helpful?
Yes.
Okay, good. But yeah, just one sentence. You could take 2 lines to do it. Space, core strengths as a header, and then list those core strengths with, as bullet points with a little bit of emphasis or kind of summary of your experience. Let's see here. So John Hopkins, VP of Human Resources. Even though that was only 4 months, I would not leave that empty.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I was wondering, why did I leave that blank? But because I think it was because it was only 4 months, and it's not something I really want to do again.
and you can tell that to people. I mean, you can. So again, you could lift out your core strengths, but if your human resource is not one of them, don't share it.
Well, it's not that it's not a core strength, because I've been advising HR for 35 years, but it's not something I enjoyed doing.
Would want to do, right?
And as opposed to practicing law. Yeah.
Sure. And I'm sure you wouldn't mind opportunities that come to you.
Yeah, I might consider it, but I will put something in there. I don't know why I didn't put anything in there.
Yeah. So to take advantage of the 4 months they had you as an interim VP of HR, again, what was your role, space, maybe one sentence, John Hopkins Hospital, and then what happened in those 4 months? Can you provide a couple, examples of what happened?
Oh, sure.
I imagine that was a pretty hefty role, and stepping in and trying to put your arms around it. Like, how many people did you see? Because what I hear from you as leader, what I hear from you is a manager and leader of people over process and programs and responsibility. So you stepped in because someone trusted you to run that department for an interim period of time. So from a high level, what was that in your hands?
Okay.
Okay. I would do the same thing as a judicial law clerk. And I just want to say this to everybody, because I didn't mention it to, I think it was Sean, was don't leave things empty, guys. Take advantage of the opportunity to put a little bit of information in there. Even with my format, I do recommend. So one sentence, what was your role? You were a judicial law clerk for, was it, I'm sure, a certain judge there or something?
Yes.
Okay. And then circuit court for Baltimore City, maybe even very descriptive. One sentence after your role, and then you could put a space and a header, highlights, and then what did you do for that year plus? Because clerking is valuable and employers appreciate clerks, but why? Give the reasons why it was valuable. Explain some of the things you touched on.
Okay.
Okay. So let's see here.
So did you say earlier I should put the years in for when I attended undergrad and grad?
So I do advise that. Not everybody listens to me, and that's okay. But employers are going to ask you anyway. So why not put it in there? And I'm the belief of just honesty policy, and I believe that you I think people fear like they're going to be ruled out immediately for certain things. But I think if an employer already has what they're looking for, and I find most employers have horse blinders on, they just are only looking for something specific. So instead of you wasting your time and then realizing and you going down this whole road of seeing if you're a candidate, and they looked at them like, oh my gosh, we didn't realize you were da 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 da, JD year or something like that. This role is only specific and graded for this. And we're sorry for wasting your time. Well, it's a waste of your time and it's a waste of theirs. And so what I tell people is be intentional, be focused, be unapologetic about your experience, be factual so that you attract the right people looking for you. There are employers who look for veteran attorneys, for senior, seasoned, very skilled folks. And I advise people to put dates on resumes and on a LinkedIn profile. So yeah.
Okay.
Other questions?
I guess just on the year thing, as an employment lawyer, I kind of vacillate
Sure, I
on
understand.
that, but it's kind of apparent if you see, I was at Hopkins for 25 years and with the city for almost 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
How long I've been out of law school, but I mean, I'm happy to put it in there. It's not, I wasn't trying to hide it. It was just
Totally.
sort of my instinct to not list it out there because, you know, in all the employment lawyers on the phone will know that we kind of recommend that you not give an employer a reason not to hire you because of age, quite frankly. So,
Totally.
yeah.
So you're right. I mean, just reading your profile people can distill and understand what your year was probably. So my opinion is purely conjecture. Like it is an opinion, and I think people ultimately need to choose what they want to do.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so,
but I have no problem, but that was my rationale.
Totally. And it makes sense. I understand that. If I was your recruiter and I was representing another employer coming to you, I'd have to talk to you anyway about it. So it's something that we would want to have documented. And so sometimes I highly recommend people to avoid the uncomfortableness of asking the question is usually
Sure.
why I suggest it. So I realize that we are at our time. Thank you so much for that kind feedback, Karen.